All right, thank you so much for indulging the photograph. We're going to go ahead and get going. Thank you all for coming, and it's so glad to see some people here at the final meeting for now. We have a slight deviation to the agenda, so we're going to start with Jameson, and if he wants to make some opening remarks before we move into the rest of the agenda.
Hi, and good evening. And thank you for being here, participating in this. You put a substantial amount of work and effort into being here, and we really appreciate that effort. And it's going to bear fruit. This isn't the end of the process. This is the beginning of the process. As we develop our framework, we're going to continue to take into the information that's been shared here, your feedback here. We're going to be looking at other panel interviews, not panel interviews. I'm going to call it panel interviews. Other interviews that we'll be having around the community, but also interviews that we've had prior to this process starting as well. And when we get the draft framework together, we'll be sharing that back with you for more feedback. I also want to say that this doesn't have to be the end of this kind of effort. We're talking now internally around what we've been calling reimagine the ride, which this will be the baseline for how we communicate with our communities. And we want to make sure that we're engaging key stakeholders. So this doesn't have to be the end of this group or this kind of group at LTD. We have several different committees of the board, but what we don't have is a regular citizens or rider kind of body. So we're talking through that internally now as well. So I want you to know that. As we move forward, if the chair and vice chair would like to reconvene from time to time to check in on how we're doing and offer more feedback, we're certainly open and would welcome that. We also plan to share our framework on our website as well, so we can check in with the community and display the fine work that was done here and that will continue to go on. I hope you've enjoyed your time here together and have made some connections, both with each other and into the transportation community. And hopefully you'll stay in touch and that doesn't end here. But we do look forward to working with you into the future. And again, this is not the end. It's actually the exciting beginning of a next chapter of who we are. For 50 years, LTD has been around. Our enabling legislation was from 1970. Okay, 1970. Tom will say 69, I think. Yes. But I'm going to go with 70. And things have changed. Transportation has changed. Mobility has changed. And I don't use transit or transportation often. I use the word mobility the most, because I think it's important for us to develop programs and services that meet the priorities of our communities. And the priority for each of our communities is not always a 40-foot or 60-foot bus. Oftentimes it's something different, whether it's a sidewalk to get to that bus, or whether it's a shared bicycle or a bike lane or bike infrastructure. I think those are all in the space of what LTD can actually do or help partner to do. Reimagine the Ride is not about LTD trying to operate everything and own everything and a big power grab for Lane County. It's not that. What Reimagine the Ride is about is how do we better connect people in Lane County, no matter where they are. And if their goal is to age in place, how do we help facilitate that? If the goal is to help eliminate food deserts, how do we help solve for that? So mobility can help with different priorities that exist throughout our region. And for us to learn that and to execute on that, we have to have a framework with how we're communicating with the various communities that are here. So that's why this work is so important. That's why it's foundational to us, to the future, not just for LTD, but for our communities and really delivering on what our communities need. So I just want to say thank you for taking time away from other things you could be doing on Wednesday evenings and helping us to work through how we move forward. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Jameson. Daniel, you want to take over?
So just a little bit of housekeeping. So it is our last meeting, so there's not much to go over. but make sure that you have signed in, and then we can review the agenda. Joshua and I are going to lead us through closing the gap from ideation to implementation. And then we'll go through reflection, round robin, and closing remarks and next steps. Obviously, we already took our photo, but we do want to take some time to see if anybody has any questions or any comments that they want to raise at this time of our, definitely take it away if you have any comments or questions.
I just want to let you know in advance, I have a 7 o'clock meeting across town that I'll have to leave for. So when I leave, it's not because I'm mad. Thanks.
But you could do that. That's also
I also have to leave about 6:30.
Okay. Yeah, we'll try to get through a lot of the substance before then if we can. But thank you all for trying to stay as long as you can. I know everyone has lots of commitments, so this is on a Tuesday instead of a Wednesday. So. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about how we get to something that is really critical and useful from all the time and effort that we put in. Let's just kind of return to, I think it's before we close this out, remembering why we're here and what we're trying to do. The goal here is to create a framework for engagement so that LTD can be more effective in engaging with the community. And we've spent a lot of time with you over the last few months getting the inputs to that plan. And that was, Jameson said, we will, when we develop that draft, send it to you and seek your comment on that. The reason that we're trying to do that is that we've seen that effective public engagement is critical for LTD to be successful. It's critical for any transit agency, but particularly given the history of what's happened here, it's critical for LTD to rebuild the trust in the community and to really help give the community what it actually wants. And that's really what we're trying to get at with the engagement framework. So we've tried to do that by understanding what's happening in the community, building community relationships, understanding the needs, and making sure we have a broad representation, trying to figure out what the best possible engagement techniques are, and then documenting and sharing community's impact on decisions. So that's what we see as critical to public involvement. And we've tried to hit on a lot of these things over the last couple of months. I mean, from beginning with the composition of this group, right, to make sure that it was broad representation and that relationships are being built and have been built right here, but you've also given us a lot of strategy about how to build more relationships, understanding better what it is you want. That's something we've talked a lot about. And then of course, talking about techniques and strategies, which we've done the last couple of meetings, which will be really helpful as we put together the frame. So for the first 5 meetings, just to kind of review some of the things we did, we tried to define what we meant by community engagement and the guiding principles. We talked a lot about the different stakeholders and partners and their varying needs. We looked at different strategies and tactics for various scenarios. And we prioritized. We tried to really prioritize those strategies and tactics, knowing that LTD can't do everything that ideally it should do. We have to make some choices. And now we're getting to this final meeting, which, as Jameson said, is not necessarily the final meeting, it's just the final one we have scheduled for now. And what we want to get at here is how do we maintain engagement over long periods of time? Because one of the things that we heard pretty consistently as we prepared for this ESD was that maintaining engagement over a long period of time was a challenge, and that some projects had suffered from the fact that people change, communities change, perspectives change, opinions change, and it is difficult to maintain engagement, sustain that engagement from conception to reality of a project because projects take a long time. So we want to talk a little bit about that. We want to talk about how we would measure progress and effectiveness with respect to community engagement, because we need to know whether we're doing it well, and reflecting on what is most important about community engagement. So we're going to get to all of those things today, and we want to make sure that this is not the end and that this is something that continues. So we will be emailing and corresponding, and your chair and vice chair will be a place where you can come at any moment and ask for things or talk about things and keep this alive, even if we're not necessarily meeting in person. But again, you could decide, you know what, we really should, there's things we want to get at that we didn't get to yet. So I just want to review some of the key takeaways from the last meeting, because I felt like we accomplished a lot and it was really helpful. And I know not everyone was here, but really, I think our most productive meeting yet. And some of the things that we determined were what we did. For those who weren't here, we went through a scenario where we were trying to understand how to make a change within a community. It's as simple as that, right? And we were saying, well, what are the priorities that we would do, that we would identify for the things we would do in phase one. So we said, okay, well, the top priorities would be that we would identify the priority routes and engage people who travel those routes, including non-transit riders, that we would have established parameters and criteria for developing solutions, and then we would work through those solutions. And then we would collaborate with cities and other partners to help develop the solutions. The scenario that we proposed here was that people wanted better first last mile connections. We just used that as an example scenario. It could have been anything. We used that because we felt like that was something concrete that we've heard on and off throughout this process, and the people all can imagine how that is something that could be improved. And this is what people came up with. And then in phase two, we asked, okay, well, how do we finalize and come up with solutions that really have broad support? And people said, well, okay, here's some top priorities. We want to build a coalition with diverse stakeholders that can champion solutions. We want to find support and commitment from city partners because we can't do anything without their help. We want to use some version of cost-benefit analysis where we show the trade-offs and transparency between different solutions. And then we want to talk about how those solutions align with the values of the community as they've been identified. So these were really great takeaways that I think are going to be direct inputs into the community engagement framework. So we really appreciate that. And then for phase three, what we did there was we said, okay, what do we do if there's a powerful minority of people that is opposing whatever solution the community has developed? What are some of the things we could do there, and how do we prioritize those? And these are some great ideas you guys came up with, including using data and peer examples, including a no action alternative so that there isn't bias, for or against the status quo, that people understand the status quo has its challenges as well. Conducting stakeholder mapping, so make sure that you're getting to all those stakeholders that you need to get to. Looking at history and learning from the past challenges to address concerns that come up, because there's a lot that can be learned from those. Having a dedicated person at LTD that can really give face time to the people who have concerns and really explain the process and try to understand where they're coming from. Having a trigger point to evaluate if you really do have supports, really knowing is this a go, no go, and understanding what that means and what that really looks like. Considering the scale of the project, so perhaps it can be scaled up or scaled down. Maybe you start with a demonstration or a pilot of some kind in order to try to calm the people who might be concerned about it. And then making sure that you continue to treat those who have concerns with respect and maintain continuous communication. This is not an us versus them scenario. We're all in this together. Let's figure it out together. So again, all great takeaways, and we appreciate the good work you put in. So unless there are any questions about any of those takeaways or what's happened previously, I'd like to get into the first group exercise. So we're good, we're ready to go. All right. So this exercise, one of the things we didn't get to last time that we think is really important is this issue of maintaining support over a sustained period of time. And so just like we did last week, we're going to have you guys throw up some ideas for solutions, for ideas or strategies that we could use to help maintain support. Now we're assuming a scenario where a co-developed solution has been created, right? Community LTD's worked with the community, they've gone through all these other steps, they've come up with something, they've dealt with a lot of the criticism, they've worked through that, but now there is a new problem because the neighborhood has changed, or people have, the circumstances have changed. Maybe we started and it was a booming economy and now it's recession, or something's changed. What are the strategies that LTV should be using from the beginning of the process, throughout the process, to try to maintain the level of engagement so that that as things change, people can be informed, people can be brought along, and that support does not waver. So feel free to throw out ideas. Emma's gonna write them down, and then we're gonna go into breakout groups and discuss how we prioritize them, just like we did last time. So, anyone want to start with ideas about how to maintain support? Yes, thank you, Michelle.
Whatever the project solution was, there needs to be benchmarks of success. I mean, from whether it's quarterly, 6 months, yearly, whatever is the appropriate timeline, and then report out whatever has been done to reach those benchmarks. And it cannot be missed. If the benchmark is not missed, the communication still has to come out with a plan of how to catch up or to change the timeline.
So what you're saying is, as soon as possible during the project process, you want to establish these benchmarks where you're going to be reporting out and having specific things that you're going to accomplish by that time, so that people have expectations about what's going to happen, and then those expectations are hopefully met. And then there's consistent engagement, at least at those points. Is that what
exactly? And then if someone's coming in the middle of it, they're still seeing the benchmarks and they can still review it.
Got it. Okay, right. So you can say, oh, well, you're coming in the middle. Look at these. This is how we got to this. Okay. Thank you. Yes.
I'll just add to that to have from the beginning of a project a timeline that helps to keep people oriented to where we've started with this work, when we're working on what the vision and the solutions might be and how long implementation will take. A lot of times when processes take a long time, it seems like, and maybe this is because of a lack of patience with decision makers, or a concern that it will reflect a lack of urgency or efficient use of time. Project timelines, in every update meeting start with like where we are today, and we lose that history, and they end with whatever the decision making is related to that moment. But for the broader community, that tends to undermine our understanding of how long it takes to accomplish the things that we're working on, or what the trajectory has been moving toward over time in different projects.
Okay. Yeah. So it's similar to what Michelle was saying, but you're saying there's a transparency about a timeline. There's regular updates about how that timeline is changing. Is that what you're getting at?
And maybe more as an orientation device.
Okay.
To the whole project and what it takes to go from what should we do to having that improvement available to the public.
Okay.
Whereas benchmarks, I tend to think of as more granular, like here's how we know how we're doing it in each of these different phases or points in time.
Got it. Okay. Yes. Right. Good things to work together. Okay. Other thoughts? Yes.
In addition to when there's a project and reporting on that, I think more continuous communication to the community, not necessarily about projects, but just information from LTV to the community, and also intake to LTV from the community.
What form do you think is most effective for that?
Well, I mean, this is just an example, but seeing the bus cat saying we need bus drivers, or, it's telling the community that we need bus drivers. I mean, just any way that there can be communicated to the community, just in general information about LTV, and also taking in information general. I mean, I brought this up before, but our neighborhood, neighborhood transportation committee, we've come up with a plan, an infinity loop that we would love to share. And so if there's opportunities for communities to give input, but also for LTV to give input to the community.
So I'm hearing two different things there, right? Because I'm hearing continuous communication, as in like
finding ways to naturally communicate, like you used the example of the bus, but I could think of other things where there's signs or there's some kind of piece in the newspaper, or there's other things that are going on. But then a second thing you said that I think is interesting is kind of like intercept events, right? Like we've talked about this in previous meetings, like there's already an event happening. Let's say it's with your community group. That's an opportunity for LTD to come and talk and hear your ideas, but also talk about, give information, right?
Right.
I'd say that one of the important things that after you've identified your stakeholders, your shareholders, try to figure out a way to not annoyingly, plug them, constant emails, et cetera, but important bullet point emails that go out to maybe not everybody, but specific groups that you want to target, like minority groups or the Hispanic community, or and make sure that it goes out in the proper language and not all the time, but enough that they know you're there, right? And not annoying, right? Like most of the emails that I get.
So help me, what's the difference between an annoying version and a less annoying version?
The one that you have to respond to and nothing happens. There's nothing in it for you, right? What do I get for engaging? I get a letter back saying, thank you very much. This was an important event. This was an important thing. Thank you for your input. And that way it builds that.
So it's really some kind of continuous engagement that is giving feedback so that you know that you're not just sending things into the ether and that somebody's reading it and hopefully noticing it and maybe even doing something about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, I can help with that. So I initially was hearing this aspect of cultivating various stakeholder groups through more direct or personal or topical issues that would be relevant to those stakeholders. But then you also said making sure that communication is not just one-sided and that anything that's coming in, they're demonstrating how that was used.
I think that's a separate strategy, right? Because I mean, yes, you could do both, but I think it's a really good point that having a mechanism of communication that ensures it's not just one way is a better way to build trust. Yeah.
A lot of those are, communication heavy, which is important. I think including in that communication would be information on, budgeting and how money is being spent and, what the long-term plan is and is that being executed, on time, or things going as planned and projected and so forth.
Yeah, so including in the benchmarks then is not just benchmarks of progress, but also the financial components, so people are aware of the costs and the benefits, right? Yeah.
I think in addition to on paper benchmarks, it would be great to have like open houses or in-person visits to a project for community members to come out too, and also for LPD leadership to also come out and sort of engage in the community that way. Or, if there's as mentioned before, if there's a dedicated person that, on a Friday or, or something like that, gives a community in person, this is where we're at compared to last week.
So for example, in our example of the first last mile project, we've identified this corridor. Okay, well, so on this evening, we're going to have a demonstration or like some kind of meeting or discussion that's right there. That's at the actual place so that people can imagine or see what it might be like as it moves forward. Is that what you're? Yeah.
Can you read? Sorry.
So Daniel's talking about like events that are local to the project itself, like an event at the project that includes LTD executives that allows people to engage with them and talk to them about what's happening or going to happen in the future.
You guys already present to Lions Club and Rotary and all that.
Yeah, so that was all part of, yeah, as we went through. Yeah, now we're thinking like, what do we do about maintaining the constant communication? Because, you know, how many times are you gonna go to the lines? Yeah, right. So it's a question of, is that a good use of time given limited resources versus other things? That's what we're gonna get at with the breakout groups.
Yeah, Travel Land County also, some of our board members, we would welcome informational things.
Yes.
So I think to Karen's point about sort of the continuum of a project, you've also got a continuum of the people who live or are employed along these routes or these projects. So they're in different stages of awareness of the project. So I would say early on and often repeating the why purpose of the project in that sort of elevator pitch level language, and always having that at the top line of the material, because you should always assume that someone is reading it for the first time, and just kind of keeping it at that basics, the fundamental of the why. I think my sense on these projects is you are selling it every time you talk about it as though it's new. The other component is that these communities grow faster than our projects come out of the ground. So maybe figuring out ways to work with like the city or municipalities who are monitoring permits that are being pulled, and trying to be a bit predictive as to where maybe a subdivision is starting to pull permits, or we're seeing lot subdivisions, or we're seeing substantial building investments in commercial. Understanding that's probably indicating a newcomer to the conversation, that we don't want to accidentally skip that purpose moment. And have them say, wait a minute, I didn't know anything about it, which is probably true because they're kind of new to the zip code.
How engaged are you guys with planning commission and city planning?
Yeah, I mean, and we talked about that a lot last meeting too. Like, if in order for these things to be successful, there's going to have to be substantial engagement with those groups, because they're dependent on those groups. I saw more over here, so yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing that would be helpful is to have LTD leadership or staff, you know, being sort of, once a project is envisioned, as we're going through these years to get funding, get it built, make it happen, to have folks regularly pushing to be advocating in public for this project, and not telling us it was co-developed, not telling us it was the winner of the feasibility study chart, but telling us the whys, and keeping like, this project is important. You know, we identify this as important because it will do X, Y, and Z, and just having that in people's faces over and over. And it's hard, it's difficult work. A lot of people at public agencies aren't used to self-advocacy. So you know, I recognize that it's difficult, but I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Well, as part of that two-way communications, you need to be able to assess, has the territory changed? I mean, if opposition is building, you don't want to find out about it when they put the initiative on the ballot.
Right. So continuous assessment throughout the project about the changes that are occurring, so you can be aware of them before they actually come and bite you. Right.
And adapt if necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. You got that? I know they're coming fast.
Yeah.
All right. We're running out of room, but any others before we prioritize? Yeah.
This is related to those last 2 points, but I think it's important to address misinformation when it's circulating within the community. Not maintain support, means to add support. Why does support go away? People hear other things or other information. Sometimes that information might not be accurate. We've talked to our principals now about not being defensive and going in these different conversations, coalitions of diverse stakeholders will champion solutions. But having facts calmly shared and not shared defensively when there might be reasons that erode support being circulated is, I think, critical.
Yeah. Is there anything you guys have seen where, because I'm assuming a scenario where there are newcomers coming in who have not been involved in the process necessarily, and they're saying, okay, these are our versions of the facts, right? And then LTD is saying, well, this is what we think are the facts. Have you seen any strategies that have been successful in kind of reconciling those things? Because a lot of times, at least I've seen, you know, people can have different versions of the facts, and it's difficult to get agreement on what they are, right?
I'm imagining some scenarios like what you're describing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm sure you have. Yeah.
I think to keep it simple is important for most people when they're presented with information that's not accurate. It's presented oftentimes like one of the tells is it's just too obviously simplistic in what's being presented. And that's hard to respond to. But I think, you know, rather than arguing with people about, you know, whether or not their facts are the same as your facts, for the agency involved in accomplishing that project and maintaining support, to speak to the facts that the agency has agreed to. And it's really the speaking and sharing of that information, because that seems to be the issue, is that misinformation is shared and then nothing. People are concerned about it seeming defensive, yet other information is shared in that context.
Yeah. Yes.
What I've seen more is in the past that a decision was made for a project with changes, and all of a sudden the public's told about it. That's where I can see more of the problems. And really,
I mean, the public's told about the change, or they're told about the product?
Well, I mean, it's after the fact that the public finds out about the community. And that's why I'm very encouraged by this process and by Jameson's philosophy or whatever of having people have input in the decision rather than having the decision made and then people react to it. That's what I've seen as a major problem.
Going back to,
go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I think we'll probably both go back to the misinformation topic, maybe. So I can think of some examples on some corridor projects that were discussed conceptually in the region, and misinformation was a component of it. That, you know, was property takings were going to occur. Commercially sized freight vehicles would be unable to gain access. Some of those very fear-motivated concerns are coming out because of viability of a business, it's an asset of a business. There was some misinformation in it. There was some truth in it. There was actual kind of investment and fear on both sides. What I would say, in having experienced that, is that there probably could be the role of a board member or leadership that could have come into play in some of those conversations in smaller settings that might have been meaningful to the community side, to say this was so important to us and LTD understood it enough that LTD showed up at their highest level to do that kind of mutual agreement, mutual fear share. And in the experience I'd had in that example, I don't know that we saw that occur, and that was many years ago. So pre some of the staff here. But I think that's meaningful. I think that companies want to see the top leadership of an organization come to the table with them at their moment of,
right. No, it demonstrates seriousness and that you really are taking it seriously and that you care. No. Is that what you were getting at or something?
Yeah, that was part of what I was going to say. One of the lessons I learned specifically in the military was, if they're disagreeing with you, agree with them until they agree with you. And it's a very simple psychological thing. You agree with them And then you start to change their mind and it works. It's amazing.
Are you a hostage negotiator or?
Actually, I was a cheerleader.
Okay, yeah. That's a hostage negotiation technique as well, yeah. Yes.
Well, I'm thinking of the example of my neighborhood, MX Long River Road. The opposition was saying they're gonna take 50 acres of land in order to provide the flood changes. LTD had maps, and exactly showed what property that were gonna be taken, and it was like 20 parking spaces across the whole route, but they didn't put it up front. The same is true about whether or not ride times would change. They have done studies that showed that there would be no appreciable change. But both of those were buried 4 layers down in the website. And there was no effort to bring that information forward.
And there'll only be 2 lanes.
Well, yeah.
So being
if you
transparent.
have information that really refutes the opposition, make it
out, put it out there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I want to move on to prioritization. So there's a lot of great ideas. And we're going to do what we did at the last meeting as well, which is break out into groups. We've got, I think, a group of 4 here. And then could we do 2 groups of 3 there? Like 3 and 3? And then a group of 4 here?
Can you just quickly read everything so that? Right,
yeah.
Before I can.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so we have A, have benchmarks of success and report out regularly what those are against established milestones. B, have a timeline that orients people to what will happen, report out where we are today and the anticipated trajectory of progress. C, continuous communication of information, not necessarily project specific, to the community and take in information from the community regularly at intercept style events. D, cultivate regular communication mechanisms to various stakeholder groups that is localized and relevant. E, have a mechanism for demonstrating how input and comments were used. F, regular communication about financial circumstances, including how budgets are performing. G, taking advantage of existing events in a geographic or project area to share out about specific project. H, early and often repeat the why of a project and always keep it top of materials and attention. I, be predictive of where there are newcomers and work to bring them up to speed. J, use overt messaging and self-advocacy. K, assess how occurring changes impact a project and adapt them if necessary. L, address misinformation quickly with facts by keeping it simple. M, lean on the LCD board and leadership to show up to address specific concerns, especially when the concerns come from a place of fear and misinformation. And D, don't hide or shy away from sensitive information.
Okay. So what we'd like you to do is you can use the letters. That's what we did last time. It's pretty easy to like say, well, these are the top, the ones that we like.
Top 3.
Top 3 is good. And maybe also say like, we deprioritize these didn't seem as important to us, but the key is what are the ones you like the best? And then we'll have a little group discussion about that. Okay, we're going to give 10 minutes for this exercise.
So but so we're kind of really
I would say the last number I had
Okay, but so would you, so we're coming back at three. Why? Okay.
More things that I filled out is.
25, how long?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That we do.
I know, but I actually was surprised when I had that morning, so.
It seems like I mean, there's different things happening. There's like making sure that like and also trying to make sure.
What reminds me of Jay, Robert said, yeah.
How are you?
And so I guess see the whole
Yeah.
And then
And literally right there. Oh, yeah.
Then that kind that's usually the focus would be more in a way of like it would have this not trying to like necessarily like shut it down. It's just kind of like
I got it. Not that it's not important, I just think I was low on the. People don't turn up after that, because I feel like that's.
yeah.
But I don't know how that's
I think we could.
Usually not.
I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's pretty.
All these,
I mean, I
all
think
put together and then A. And F. All together.
Yeah. But it's
Well,
that.
let's see, it will with,
And I think that would.
that sort of, you know, changes your gap. Yeah.
So,
Like this, I
So we're messing stuff up. So
It's easy to get, especially this.
planners don't want
Yeah, right. Have you guys started? That's pretty change on the
Okay.
but I don't know. I really don't creating CD and J.
Yeah, let's put them all together. Gotcha. So then, so number one is A. Number two is C, D, and J. And then number three is N. Am I getting that right?
Saying the same thing 4 different ways. Obviously, we're grouping things together. Right.
Okay. Yes.
How many words does it take to say?
Is there anything we want to do?
My job is literally to run charts from paragraphs.
So this is your editor.
I write commercial copy.
But that has to be it.
Yeah, so I take all of this and then sit down.
All right, we good? Ready?
And then what's the call to action? More like it, yeah.
Let's see if we can come to some agreement here. We're gonna start over this side with this group. What did you guys prioritize?
I think we talked about A. Having benchmarks of success and reporting out regularly when those are against established milestones. And so having that foundation, a clear structure of the process. The next one we looked at, we felt C, D, and J were very similar. Just consistent communication, cultivating regular communication, clear communication, and so C, D, and J. And then our last one was N, thinking about transparency. Transparency. Hello. Okay. Transparency with letter N. Yeah.
Was there anything that you thought was not hugely important, just if you're under tight resources and
All right. How about this group here?
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna like this exercise because I think we're gonna give you check marks by every single thing.
Well, just keep in mind that LTD can't do everything. So yeah, what do you like?
So we had a similar sense that there's actually a lot of the same topic of communication regularly occurring up here, but maybe what's happening is it's identifying it as the why, the purpose, the benchmarks, the financials, and the timeline. So regular communication is our one, which includes a lot of those. C, D, F, H, A, sorry. The number 2 was M, and these aren't necessarily in order, but we really think the LTD board leadership needs to start being more out front and active in the community, and especially in project settings. And then N, also sensitive information. It's going to come up in the conversation at some point. You might as well control it and get it out there early and often. We did not have any that we thought ought to be downgraded. These are, if this is a priority project, it's a kind of all hands, all resources. So, all right.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I just clarify?
Yeah.
So I really liked how you guys basically collapsed a few and said you wanted to see regular communication that covered, is it the why, the purpose, the benchmarks, the financials, and the timeline? Was it those five?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Next group.
We similarly did some grouping of just recognizing that a lot of these really go in tandem together. So B and H we thought were really great, especially as we kind of, I think you just checked B, sorry, as in boy. I kind of summed that up as just really adding one word to H, which is early and often repeat the why and when of the project. So
which one?
Of H.
Okay.
Early and often repeat the why and when. That kind of ties into B. Yeah, you're talking about the value and kind of also how we got here and being realistic about the runway ahead of you. We also grouped together L, J, and N. Yeah, just really trying to be N, Nancy. Trying to be transparent, but then also to be, I think with the J, you know, just to be firm and advocating for facts and truth. And then D, okay, so we did end up checking D as in dog, and M we also grouped together of really kind of thinking about spokespeople, thoughtful leadership presence from LTD.
That's great. Okay. Yeah. I mean, so grouping these together and having a lot of things be priorities makes a lot more sense than last 2 weeks ago when we had things that were more resource intensive. A lot of these are not resource intensive as much they are strategies, right? So combining them makes a lot of sense. Last group. Yeah. Okay.
I was gonna say I got my hands slapped for grouping them together last time, but that didn't stop us this time. We took a look at H, J, and D and sort of grouped those together. With H sort of being the predominant there, like early and often repeat, you know, overt messaging sort of pairs with that. Along with, you know, regular communication to stakeholders, like those three things all sort of fell together. Next on our list was N, not hiding sensitive information or shying away from the details. And then following that, we grouped together A, F, and K, which are all just communication pieces as well. Just transparency and communication, and those three sort of covered all of that. We thought that, like the other group, all the tactics were important to consider, and they all certainly are worthy of being on it. However, you know, if we had to pick a bottom, you know, or something to put off, we picked G.
Yeah. Okay, this is great. So what I'm seeing is there's a lot of support for the idea of benchmarks. That's good. Regular communication mechanisms, something that people really like. Early and often, I'm talking about the why, overt messaging and self-advocacy. And then interestingly, people really want the sensitive information out there. I think that's great because that is such a mistake that a lot of the public agencies make all the time, is they think, well, it's sensitive, so I shouldn't share it. But then, of course, people are like, well, you're not sharing the information. And it creates mistrust. So great. Well, I really like that. And then people like the board and leadership showing up, not surprisingly. So this is good. We can
I got
collapse.
that all down.
Yeah.
Yep. So I'm gonna erase that, and then we're gonna do extras too.
Yep. Okay.
It's 6:30. So.
Okay. Yeah, we're trying to move quickly here. I know a lot of you have to leave. So
one of the things we chatted briefly about was getting people to the website, getting maybe a reward, a random reward, like your visitor number is such and such, boom, you get a month-long pass. Just to get people to go and get used to seeing the website and the information.
no, it's good. I like that. Okay, So what we're going to talk about now is, well, the framework's going to be drafted. We're going to share it with you, but we don't want the framework to just be a moment in time. We want it to be a living document that is continuously updated because things change, people change, and experiences change. So we want to talk a little bit about how the framework itself, and this involves you, like what are the things that you as a group want to continue to be involved with, and how do you think you want to help shape the framework as it evolves from the draft to then some version of a final and then beyond of like, okay, we're going to make changes based on this experience or that experience. Just to what we define is called continuous improvement, right? And for those who are not familiar with continuous improvement, it's a pretty self-explanatory idea, but it's the idea that everything needs to be continuously improved. It's not just like you make a change and then it's done. You have to continuously improve something because things change around it. And one-time major overhaul or a transformative design never really sticks forever. So it's a very simple idea. So what thoughts do people have about how this group can engage or the community can be engaged, or how other steps LTD can take to make sure that this framework has continuous improvement?
Can I just add a clarification?
Yeah, please.
So what we're looking for here is, to Joshua's point, strategies that can exist outside of the framework, but also if you want to think about what within the framework we want to uphold as a way for LTD to kind of evaluate progress. So if there's specific uses of metrics, for example, that could be something. So it can be anything that's actually kind of codified and documented within the framework, but then also outside of that, to Joshua's point, other mechanism strategies that you want LTD to consider.
Yes, Gordon.
We haven't seen the framework yet, so it's kind of, I'm just making sure I'm right.
You've not seen the framework. Okay. The framework is going to be developed based on large part on the inputs we've gotten from this committee, as well as a lot of other work that we did prior to this committee. But before we start the process, since this is the last meeting, we want to know, how would you like to be involved in the continuous improvement of the framework, or what other things should LTD be doing once that framework is developed?
Okay, so one element I kind of have been pondering a little is, as this comes into a structure, sometimes sort of that postmortem, if you will, of how a framework has maybe been applied to a project or an effort can be really telling about what was working, what was not. You know, did it get into a poverty trap? Did it have something need to be reinvented? So I think some of these projects at times get citizen advisory type groups or TACs. But it would be interesting to see if even a portion of this group or something like this remains engaged to do that type of small project or project postmortem of how the framework worked or didn't.
So you're thinking about, I'm hearing a couple ideas. Like, one is we need lessons learned from experiences as the framework is used, so we understand what worked well and what didn't and what can be changed, but also that maybe this group or some other form of community groups could be a way to develop some of those lessons learned. It's not just an internal exercise within LTD.
Yeah, exactly. And the other component of that, in that background thinking, I would be interested to understand what the technical LTD staff sees or understands or thinks about the framework that we haven't yet seen, because they will see things in it. I mean, they are world-class technical staff. So, you know, is there actually another cycle of the iteration where you do that collaborative feedback with those subject matter experts to improve it further?
Okay. So, yeah, what I'm hearing is that they're using the assets that LTD has, the experts that they have in-house, as a way of understanding lessons learned more effectively. Is that right?
And the effectiveness of this concept, the framework.
The effectiveness of the framework.
Like we're talking about, like
Like
Yeah.
whether they
It's-
found the framework as like something that was possible and relevant and applicable to their work and able to be held up.
Yeah, or useful, is it added?
I think a lot of us would welcome the idea of acting as a filter.
Hmm.
You know, shooting through and kind of a place to touch base and get immediate feedback.
So perhaps like before employing certain aspects of the framework, maybe kind of bouncing ideas off of you about like, okay, we're thinking, you know, the framework says this, and so we're thinking about doing that, and does that make sense to you?
Wait.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So I think,
I missed that, sorry, I'm behind.
That's it. We're just using this group or the community as a sounding board for some of the ideas that LTD may come up with that are based on the framework.
Okay.
I think the benefit of this group has been, we've been able to have our feet in this and be intentional with our approach and share our perspective. And so I think this next stage is getting that feedback from groups that didn't make it into this group. So maybe applicants who did not get to join the board.
That's great.
Or go back to those survey opportunities where we were engaged in the first place and say, hey, you know, that steering council, or these are the new frameworks that we're working on. Here's this opportunity to get with those strategy groups and engage with them. Because I do think like we were here to help this process move forward. And that's the beneficial part. And then asking for people to come in and hear our words is good too.
That's great. Yeah, and I should have mentioned earlier that as a follow-up to the community survey, we are planning on doing some focus groups to try to target some of the folks that we didn't necessarily capture in the survey itself. But you're saying is additive to that, which is there are other ways to engage along similar lines to how we've engaged you with some of the groups that perhaps wanted to be a part of this, weren't, or offer different perspectives, which is great. Other thoughts?
I was going to add to that, I learned that there were 70 applicants for this group other week or the other day. And in thinking about the principles that we discussed, that continuous improvement applying to the development of this framework, that finding a way to engage those 50 other people in the near term would be a great example of LTD living out those principles, even in the process of, and not from the perspective of we now together with people who weren't selected, but you indicated that you care about our transit and our transportation networks, and we want for you to feel and be a part of this in your feedback.
Yeah, that's great. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if the first one, for example, conducting a postmortem for a project yet to be developed or to apply this framework for a future project that was maybe a consideration.
What I heard was, and I think this was Courtney, so you can clarify better than I can, but what I heard was the framework will be applied to specific projects, and we will have experiences that inform what changes need to be made based on how it is applied and what happens.
Right. So what I'm thinking is, okay, that you develop this framework or you develop this framework, and it's applied going forward and see, you know, how you kind of maybe have a feedback loop about how it's working relative to how it was conceived. But I wonder if there's any value in kind of, you know, almost like game playing or game theory or whatever you want to call it. But I mean, doing a retrospective. A lot of people in this group, and maybe others that aren't here, but have been involved in some other efforts that LTD has done, good or bad, and trying to apply that framework then to say what could have been done better or what could we have done different. And so really kind of, you know, it's a little bit of soul bearing and, you know, setting aside any defensiveness from whomever may be around that maybe worked on a particular project, or allow finger pointing to occur. And just sort of say, well, this messed up because these people from the outside sort of had misinformation they spread about a project. Or it could be we messed up because we didn't take a more active role in the board hid. And they should have been a little more vocal in support, whatever it is.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're saying is one of the inputs to this framework should be whatever lessons we can gather from some of the past challenges, make sure that they're represented in this framework and that it addresses those challenges. Right?
You apply the framework to say, how would it work? How would that project work? How do we have this framework to really apply to it?
Right, right. Okay, yes.
To Bill's point a little bit too, it sounds a little bit like a progress report or a self-assessment, like, you know, benchmarks along the way, like there should be something in place that, you know, if there were some assessments being done, that it could further the project or further the tweaks that need to be made based on those assessments. But I wrote down some continuing education. Just because this makes sense in this moment, there should probably be some continued evaluation on LTD's part with respect to things like the community demographics and population and congestion and rural route efficacy and, you know, and benefits and those sorts of things, because those change so frequently. I think we talked about that a little bit earlier, but staying abreast of those things in addition to an evaluation, you know, some sort of evaluation along the way, I think in combination could be helpful in, you know, continuous improvement.
Yep. So continuing to evaluate those things, make sure we're getting them as we go along. Makes sense. Okay. Anything else? All right. This is really great. We're gonna close out the last meeting here by doing something we haven't really done before, which is what we call round robin. And the idea here is that we would like everyone to say this. And, you know, if you really don't want to say anything, we're not going to make you say anything. But if it's possible, we'd like everyone to think about and say what your most important takeaway. If LTD takes away one thing from this experience of having this council regarding community engagement, how LTD connects, what would that one top thing be? So that we can, and we're not going to put it on the board, we're just going to write them down and we're going to have noted. And we would, it'd be great if everyone could say their one thing as we close out. So, Karen, I know you have to leave. I don't know if you want to. So I don't mean to put you on the spot, but
one thing else you need to know regarding how LTD conducts engagement. LTD knows more about the work of delivering excellence and equitable transit service than any one individual within the community. And so I think LTD can be calm and confident and engaging with the community to understand the community's needs. And there's a capacity and role and remarkable skill and expertise that LTD brings to that, and what the community shares is a different kind of knowledge and insight that's valuable to LTD. So I hope that LTD feels encouraged about the future of community engagement, because I know it hasn't been easy, and I actually think that the work can be really good.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mom. I'm sorry that I can't. Hopefully we'll take care.
Thank you for your contribution. Who wants to go next? Please.
I think it's about continuity. The message may change from framework to framework based on the project or the impact, but always being a continuous presence. When that message changes, that trust will be there. That would be my takeaway.
Please, yes.
It would be that your time matters, and like you can be the subject matter expert all day long, and you really are. But when people are afraid or when people are angry, I think fear is at the root of it. And the thing that calms that the most is those conversations and returning a phone call and showing up. And that's not really a technical thing, that's just a human thing, and I think fundamentals, like your time, is probably the most valued thing the community wants. And I want those conversations, and it makes you feel kind of less alone and less afraid of what you don't understand.
What was it? You said 90% of life is just showing up.
Kind of piggybacking off of Brittany, to say like having like a two-way conversation basically from LTD and the community, so engaging what the community wants, and as well as LTD really explaining well about what their projects are, because normally whenever someone opposes something, it stems from them not knowing enough, maybe, or like where you said fear as well. So yeah, it's a great conversation.
Thank you.
I think there's a lot of resources at LTD's disposal in terms of engaging with their ridership. So things like advertising on the bus or at the station. So this is kind of a different answer, but I think like being really consistent with that and engaging riders in a way they engage with LTD in the first place. You know, looking up and seeing a survey opportunity or getting engaged. Those, I think, moments there and being consistent in that your branding use is a good strategy. Thank
you.
This stuff is hard, right? Like if this stuff was easy, you wouldn't have hired a consultant from out of town and gotten this group together and spent all this time together over the last few months. It's hard, and you know, we've all tried really hard to make good suggestions, a lot of things on the wall, but don't be afraid to do everything you can to show the community that you're trying. And I think that will help a lot with general trust.
Mine would be a go to where the community is. It's definitely hard because it seems like the community will come to you when they're angry, but that might not necessarily be the full story of the community. So you kind of have to go out and kind of talk to people and shake hands and meet people on the buses and kind of meet them where they are.
That's right. People often don't look to even notice who the head of a transit agency is until there's something terrible happen.
I would say be open and honest and engaging with the community in any way you can, and welcome input. You know, and when the bad comes at you, don't get your back up. Open your arms and, like I said, agree with them until they agree with you.
I love it. Thank you.
I feel like my opening comments when we started this several months ago, and my reflective comments are very similar, actually. We've had a lot of conversation around stakeholders, and so I think the one thing, like if I have to pick, you know, the one thing that I would hope that LTD would take away is that there are a number of underrepresented stakeholders that must be brought to the table. In particular, you know, my concern is for those who have a financial investment in what LTD is doing with no perceived benefit to them. These are people that are non-riders, non-interested, opposed to public transportation as it is now, and so forth. And those conversations are critical, vital, and transparency is, you know, very important with those. But I think that would be the thing that I would, you know, think would be my one takeaway.
Thank you.
I think the one thing that I would want LTD to know about sort of this process is that we're only 20-ish people out of 70. So there's a lot of voices that were left out, and I would like to see It was mentioned, but it's just the beginning of the conversation, so I would really like to, you know, I'll walk away with this room assuming to myself that LPD knows that we're only pointing out 70 people, so the commitment to continuous improvement on this would be great.
I need like everything that everybody said, but I think Smith and Jordan definitely makes an impact on what they said.
Yeah, I guess I'm just so grateful to have been asked to participate in this, and the fact that LTD has even conducted an exercise like this, I think is a great reflection on the current leadership. And it would be easy to just sort of operate the bus system and not really care what people think, or business as usual. But this really shows that there is a desire and obviously a need, but a desire to go beyond just the superficial and the way we've always done it kind of a thing. LTD's been blessed with some tremendous staff, and I think people that operate with tremendous professionalism and poise in the face of, I've witnessed, some really withering kind of in your face sort of communications. But I think a lot of times we've missed some of the top leadership in the board from really being front and center and really being the face of the representatives and the champions. They've kind of left it to the staff. I'm really glad that, it's a little bit more of a holistic approach. Concerned a little bit that LTD a lot of times has to fight with one arm tied behind its back because it might be doing a project or pulling a project that somebody else is leading. It's a very difficult prospect, but I'm glad this time.
Thank you. Want to get the last word?
I guess so, yeah. Bring us home. Yeah, I'm really grateful for this process too. I agree with Bill that it shows, a lot of openness to what's possible through community engagement. And I think consistency would be probably what I would emphasize the most going forward. And that's probably just being kind of more present within the community all the time, not just when a project is happening. Identifying kind of those stakeholders before a project is kind of needed, but just consistently communicating and consistently showing up, I think are going to be the most important.
Well done. All right. Well, thank you. This is great, and I'm glad we had some time to reflect on that, and we'll use those as takeaways. Before we finish the final meeting, I just want to go through a few next steps. I will just one comment that kind of brought up for me through the conversation. I do think this is something that is extraordinary. I think I said this at the beginning as we started. Like, we work with a lot of transit agencies around the country, and I've never seen one really do this. They all have challenges in their community. There's no transit agency that's like, oh, wait, everybody has challenges. But what I've never seen is someone really step back and say, we're going to spend a significant amount of time and resources fixing that, working on that, developing that, so that we don't just keep making the same mistakes over and over. And it is, I think I said this at the beginning, like this is what I believe could be a model for other places. I really appreciate that. So, is there another slide, or is that it? I thought maybe I wrote down. But no, so we did talk. I think we were originally planning on having James talk about some of these next steps, but he already did that. So as just to kind of reiterate what he said previously, this is not the end. This is the beginning of the development framework, and so we're going to go back and take this along with all the other inputs that we have and develop that draft framework, work with LTD staff on it, and share that with you when that is possible. We're going to hopefully find other ways to engage the chair and the vice chair. We're going to stay in contact with them, and you should feel free to as well. Hopefully they're okay with that. And you can communicate If there are other things you want to either meet about as a group, talk to each other about as a group, bring to our attention, any of that, as the development framework goes on, or even beyond that, we don't want this to be like a final meeting and that's it. And I know that Emma and I will still be coming up here and still working in your community for some time, and we really appreciate that opportunity because it's been, just speaking personally, I love coming up here. I love being part of this group and getting to know you folks and hearing people really get engaged and trying to make a difference in something in their lives and in the lives of the greater region. So thank you for your time. Emma, did you want to?
Yeah, so Joshua mentioned that we are going to be doing some focus groups, and those are going to be very intentionally set up to speak with groups that just were not showing up in the surveys. Also, I think just the feedback that we got about looking into the folks that had applied, but due to space we weren't able to accommodate, I think that is a great idea, and that's a group that clearly has demonstrated interest and should really be LTD should really be building a relationship with those groups. So that's another, I think, good lead. But also, and Joshua and others and Jameson have made comments about how this is just beginning, but I do think that there are going to be pretty specific actions where LTD is likely going to want to reach out to you to find out if there's a way, for example, the organizations or the groups that you represent and that you have been speaking about and thinking about and providing your input, that is now a new line of communication for LTD. So I know that Tom was going to want to speak about an upcoming effort and make sure and get kind of consensus if it's okay to tap into you guys as an existing resource to get your feedback on some of those things. So Tom, did you want to make some comments about that?
Yeah.
And maybe you can introduce yourself too.
What's that?
You can introduce yourself.
Tom Schwab, the Director of Mobility Planning and Policy here at LTD. I'll sit down. But first of all, I want to lend my thanks to all of you. Just a little background. I've been doing work in this community for 37 years. And so I've seen many generations of ideas coming from public sector, and then a lot of input from a very engaged community. I wanted to say, you heard Jameson mention our reimagine the ride process, and that framework is that you've developed here is intended to be folded into that process. That's why we did this first and up front, and so you'll hopefully see some of this process at work in these other engagement opportunities. I also want to send you some more background on this process of reimagine the ride so that you're up to date. Specifically, as part of that process, I'm wanting to share your emails with one of the project's consultants, the mobility management framework that we're doing. There's a group called Citify that's working on that process. And they spent a couple weeks ago, they were here on site doing a lot of interviews with various community members. But this group, first of all, I think you have a shared story, and you've learned a lot more about LTD. They'd like to talk to you as well. And so we'd like to share your emails with them. The other process we want to think about is, and I was talking to Jameson about this, this is a really good group, and not just that you as individuals. We want to think about how we might be able to form, maybe call it a community council or whatever, that could continue. I wouldn't ask you to meet monthly necessarily, but we want to figure out some way of staying connected to this group, or maybe as people maybe drop out and we add more people, just want to keep a community conversation going in a way that we can turn to a group like this and continue to develop this. The last thing I'll say is that that reimagine the ride process. There are several things that we do on a periodic, like every 3 years. We renew our strategic business plan. We conduct a comprehensive operations analysis. We update our long range plan. It's more on the 5-year timeframe. But we want to be able to have a group like this participate in that process, and again help us. And in the same way, we want to the point I heard, and y'all said it maybe a little different way, but it's important that we continue this process of updating this. So this framework isn't the one we're going to use for the next 20 years. That doesn't work. You all know the community changes. I mean, I've seen lots of change. Different issues come up. We know that we aren't communicating. We aren't reaching out to all the people that even use our service, and that could really benefit from knowing more about our service and engaging and helping us design a better service. So this has been really something that we can take away. It's been a powerful process for us, and we really want to move forward with it. We're going to take this to the board eventually. I think, what would we say, February or March, and ask them to. What's that?
That's the goal. Yeah, try to get there. This year.
But please understand, we're going to continue to apply this. Every time we apply this, we want to learn something from it, and get some kind of rational cycle. We want to update this because how we engage with the community is going to have to change as we grow, as the community grows, as you all continue to participate. So with that, maybe ask if you have any questions of me. Otherwise, thank you very much.
And thank you all so much for being a part of this, and hope we stay in touch, and hope to see you all again. Thank you, appreciate it.
Good experience. Oh boy. Yeah.